on this video basically how my path led to me becoming a millionaire by the age of 30. I remember I was 23 years old when I first started my job, getting on my suit, going to the office. We were on the 41st floor of a skyscraper in Toronto. From sort of my desk, I could look to the right of me and see the skyline of Toronto. And at first I felt really cool. I felt like I had made it. My group was investing in mining projects. We worked with offices in Australia, in Asia, in London, in New York. But after a couple months, I started to kind of question the whole thing. It started off with just how repetitive my life started to become. Weeks would go by and months would go by, especially in the winter, because in Canada it's brutal in the winter. Just the same day pass, day after day. And the only thing I was doing in my life for the most part was just getting up, getting dressed, taking the subway to the office building, going up to the 41st floor. Yeah, it's a great view, but just working, sitting at my desk. The highlights I had were when we were actually working on a deal. But there were some lull moments, which I'm sure a lot of you had, where you just kind of are just sitting there and you're waiting for work, or you're pretending to work, but really there is no live deal or there's no live project. And so I remember in those moments, I just have like existential crises. I was just like trying to figure out, like, how can I make money? How can I get out of the system? I was making a good salary. I was making near 6 figures starting base. Then once you take away the taxes and the rent, and then just like the living expenses of living in a big major city, you actually didn't get that far ahead. Even if you make more in a bonus, like as you work your way up or you get promoted, you're just getting taxed more. If you're in New York or Toronto, you're gonna get taxed like 50% on your bonus. And then I noticed like my body was starting to deteriorate. Just get like back pain, seeing like some fat on my like love handles and like my stomach. I was still like in decently good shape, but I just see that deterioration. And I was like, man, it's only been like 18 months and I'm already starting to deteriorate, and I'm like 24 years old. This can't be good. And an interesting thing with my role at the company was we'd have a lot of these like kind of mining CEOs and executives coming in every week to pitch us because they wanted us to invest in their projects. I was able to connect with some of these people and start to realize that, holy frick, like there's actually people that have been able to break out of the formula and actually become quite successful. Principle 1 is save as much money as you can. I remember pretty quickly when I realized that I was in some sort of like rat race vortex, that the best thing I could do was lower my expenses as much as possible. I moved out from my apartment to the crappiest room I could find, literally. It was a really rundown building in downtown Toronto in a very sketchy area. It was close to my office, but it was a very sketchy area. And it was essentially a really small, like probably like 200 square foot room with a shared kitchen, like across the hall, shared with like 10 other rooms, and a shared bathroom and shower. Like really sketchy people. So like I don't recommend that to everyone. But the great thing was I was paying $500 rent. So that's what I did, and it helped me save a lot more money. And like I started probably saving around $3,000 a month, which was pretty good at that time. And that's what allowed me to have the confidence to leave the job when I finished the 2-year analyst program in June of 2017. So I recommend that. Save as much money as you can to start. Not only does it make you more disciplined and more motivated and get into the grind mentality, but also it's going to give you that cushion to take more risks, whether it's an investment risk or whether you invest in yourself and you just leave your job. You need that money. That money is extremely important to start off, because in your 20s, you want to be able to take risks. You have the energy, you have the time, if you have some money, it's a really powerful combination. The next principle is to network. So let me tell you how I approach networking. For me, what I really focused on was connecting with people that I respected. And the way I did that was I took advantage of every opportunity I could. So when my company, for example, had an event or a conference, I attended that conference. And I didn't just attend it because I had to, but I really just looked at how I could build connections and build relationships with people that I looked up to. The way to do that is just to introduce yourself to as many people as possible. Introduce yourself. Hey, how's it going? My name's Nathan. What's your name? What do you do? How's it going? You enjoying the conference? And a lot of those conversations may not go anywhere, but at the very least, you might get a business card, you might get a handshake, and at the most, you could have a connection with someone. And eventually, some people were receptive to me. And I don't know if it was because they saw a kid that was driven, or if they just were bored or whatever. But for example, at a conference, some people would invite me to grab a coffee. A couple weeks later, I'd follow up with an email, and then somebody would invite me to dinner or lunch. And all I would do is when I would sit there, I would just be extremely humble and just ask questions. Tell me about yourself. What do you do? Be as interested as possible. Have a good vibe, and just build that connection. And any way you can help that person, help that person. And then eventually, I met a gentleman named Sid, who was working in my building. Been an investment banker for like 20 years, and then eventually left his own corporate grind to kind of work on his own ventures. So some of his ventures were like in the natural resources space, like mining projects and things like that. But at this time, Canada had recently announced that they were going to legalize cannabis. And there was a lot of activity happening in Toronto in the cannabis space. Some companies were raising money, going public. I was investigating the space. I was finding even other conferences, like some law firm would have some sort of like seminar on like the cannabis laws, or some investment bank would have some luncheon where they'd be presenting some companies. So I would just go to as many of those as I could. Sometimes I'd even skip work for like a couple hours, like just try to just jet out for a bit, do whatever I could to kind of connect into that space, because I sensed there was an opportunity. And then through that, I was able to meet Sid, and Sid ended up becoming one of my mentors. One time he contacted me, he said, "Nathan, I need to talk to you about something." And I said, "Okay, cool. Yeah, sure." And at that point, we'd known each other for a while. He told me, "Come down to my office." So I went down the elevator to his office on the second floor of Brookfield Place. And he said, "Nathan, I want to present to you an opportunity that could have some real potential, but I need your help on this." And so I said, "Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, how can I help?" And he said that he and his business partner had connected with a Colombian guy who, was very well connected in Colombia, and he'd heard from that person that the regulations were changing in cannabis to legalize cannabis in Colombia, which at the time was like pretty crazy, because like if you think about it, Colombia is like the drug capital. It does not have a good reputation, so the fact that they were going to legalize cannabis was pretty crazy. So I was kind of like in my head, like, are you serious? Like, is this actually happening? This doesn't sound real. Like I said, I was just trying to hustle, just trying to find a way, any opportunity I could. So I ended up coming down to Sid's office like pretty much every evening. I'd go there every weekend. I would just be like working. Like I remember sometimes I'd go visit my parents in the suburbs of Toronto, and I'd still be like working, have my laptop out, just like researching. So basically my job was to research the opportunity, kind of like do my due diligence. I also spoke a decent amount of Spanish at that time, and I still do. We were able to conclude after a couple months that this was a very real opportunity, that like this license was real, that the market could be there, and we started putting together an investor presentation, like a pitch deck. So this was like in early 2017, and the cannabis space was still like pretty early at that point. And so my takeaway there is like, if you see an opportunity, if you're lucky enough to have somebody who's really experienced present you an opportunity, it may not be the cleanest opportunity out there. It may not be like an absolute home run of an opportunity. But if an opportunity, take it on. Put in the work. It may require you working evenings, weekends. You may have to put in way more hours. Like I was still working full time at that time in a pretty intensive job at times. And just see what happens, because at that age, you don't know what's going to happen. You really don't. And by May of 2017, it formed the company. We were able to raise $2 million. And then from there, we started building a team in Colombia. So we started hiring people like legal help. We started to hire like operations managers. We started working on, okay, can we secure a lease in a rural part of Colombia, like farmland, basically. Started talking to vendors for like getting like cannabis seeds, like a lot of stuff, even before getting the license. At that time, I just reached the 2-year mark. So this was in June 2017. I went to my boss. I said, hey, I'm going to quit my job. He's like, where are you going? I was like, I don't know, somewhere in Latin America probably. He's like, holy frick, what? So I ended up doing that, quit my job, kind of like told my parents what I was doing, ended up moving down to Latin America in September 2017. Was kind of back and forth between Canada and Latin America for a while, and kind of worked on it. By October 2017, we got the first license and then raised another $3 million. By the following year, we scaled from 0 employees to 80 employees. The company went public. Eventually, the company reached a top market cap, I think, of like 400 million. At the same time, though, I was really just focused on building the skills. And I had some shares in the company, but I wasn't receiving a large salary at all. I hardly was getting paid at all, to be honest. But I was able to understand a lot of things. So I started to understand, okay, how to raise money. I started to understand a little bit about what it's like to be an entrepreneur. I learned about the cannabis space, built a network in that space and a reputation in that space. And then I was also able to understand the whole go public process and how that works from an accounting standpoint, auditor standpoint, legal standpoint. Using that knowledge, I was able to connect with another business person in the cannabis space who had recently done an exit, really exited another cannabis business in Jamaica. And we partnered together to work on a venture that was focused on the European market. We'd raised over $20 million for by mid-2019. Started selling cannabis, medical cannabis in Germany. I moved out there, worked through that whole process. And at the end of the day, the company ended up going public. To be honest, my equity was worth millions of dollars when the company went public. And then it's declined a lot with the recession. But yeah, I did reach my goal of reaching a 7-figure net worth. It was an extremely wild ride, absolutely wild ride. I might share more on future videos for people that are interested on more of the specifics of that industry. I learned so much, and I just imagine back, if I had stayed in that corporate role, maybe potentially have had more opportunities to explore different transactions, but it would have been in a very narrow space, investing in the mining space. And I wouldn't have learned these skills of how to raise money, of how to start something from scratch, of how to persuade people about a vision and to hire employees and fire employees and all these types of things. And to be honest too, the opportunity also really showed a lot of gaps in my skill set and things that I need to learn and even get better in if I want to advance financially in the future and as a person and as a leader. So there's a lot of things about taking risks that are not always pretty. You're staying in a corporate job. The great thing is you have that stability. You can kind of have a lot of weaknesses and a lot of gaps in your skill set, but just continually work up the ladder just by being, just being diligent and continuing to put in the hours, put in that 9 to 5, and you just kind of just move up the ladder, hopefully over time. When you kind of enter the arena of entrepreneurship, a lot of things can happen. Like look at what happened this past year. We've seen a lot of people that were really all in on crypto and they've just been destroyed. And other people are into, VC, startups, and technology space. They are getting destroyed too because interest rates are going up and people are valuing current income, current earnings over future potential. Even Tesla's going down. There is risk of entering the arena. Don't get me wrong. But in the long term, the growth that you're going to experience, the personal development, that's what's going to allow you to achieve those outsized financial returns and to find those opportunities that are going to make you the millions, the 7-figure and 8-figure opportunities. I really think that everyone can do this. I've seen a lot of people make a lot of money that are not the smartest people. They're not the most, analytical or whatever. There's these people that are just relentless. Guys that have made a lot of money. I know guys that are with tens of millions, hundreds of millions that I've met throughout my journey. Yes, you can stay safe, but with the world and the way things are changing, you want to find a way to get out of the 9 to 5. You really do. For most people, you want to find a way to get out of it, especially if you want to achieve financial freedom. Harness the 9 to 5, don't get me wrong. Use the opportunity to learn, build out your resume, build your network, get your savings up, but don't feel comfortable in the 9 to 5. If you get into that comfort zone in the 9 to 5, it's extremely deadly.